Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Big Questions podcast. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Would you pray with me as we get started? And then we will dig into our question. Let's pray together. God, our Father, thank you, as always, for being our perfect Heavenly Father, for what you've done for us to make that possible. Through Jesus, the cross, his resurrection, thank you for your forgiveness, your grace, your love toward us. Please help us with this question today. Father, I pray that, maybe some of us could set down some heavy weights, some heavy burdens, some maybe even shame that we're carrying that we don't need to. That we could find encouragement in this, that we could draw closer to you in this, and just get your perspective on it. Please protect this time, and please bless our time with you, God. Thank you so much. And help us get your vision for this. In the Lord Jesus Christ's name, amen. Amen. Well, on this podcast, I want to ask a question that I'm going to guess a lot of introverts like me have at least asked ourselves at some point. And that question is this: is it okay to be an introvert? Right? Especially if you're a follower of Jesus. Is it okay to be an introvert? Understanding, first of all, what we mean when we use the term introvert, right? Like by definition, because I think there's some misunderstanding of what that term actually means in our culture sometimes. As author Holly Gerth explains it so well, here it is. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert is simply about how you are wired. It's about how you respond to what happens outside of you, to external stimulation, right? I'll say that again. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert is simply about how you're wired, how you respond to what happens outside of you, how you respond to external stimulation. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. It's about how your nervous system receives information, processes it, and activates reactions. For example, introverts and extroverts differ in terms of what's called our neurotransmitters. In other words, we differ in terms of the chemical messengers that help to shape how we behave and how we respond to things that happen. For extroverts, for example, dopamine is way more active in their brains than it is for introverts. And that makes extroverts feel their best when they have external rewards, like when they're in places where there's lots of activity around them and there's noise and maybe bright lights and crowds and things like that. That really gets extroverts feeling their best. Introverts, on the other hand, for us, acetylcholine is more active in our brains. And that makes us feel our best when we have internal rewards. Right? Like when we have the joy of an aha moment, realizing something huge, right? Or the comfort of a deep connection, or just the satisfaction of a job well done. Introverts like me feel the most rewarded when we're in quieter spaces with less intense activities. Basically, as Holly Gerth says, the dopamine that fuels extroverts, you could think of it like caffeine, whereas the acetylcholine that fuels introverts is more like a calming tea. And because of how our nervous system is wired as introverts, we just need way less dopamine than extroverts do in order to feel our best. In fact, too much dopamine will make introverts feel anxious and eventually exhausted. Our brains as introverts release the chemicals that make us feel good when we turn inward and focus on ideas and have meaningful conversations and do work that matters to us. That's why introverts can sit and write for hours and hours, and we can stay fully engaged when we're listening to one person for a long time. We can go on long drives in the car with no music or podcasts or anything playing, and we can just think, right? We can focus super intently on a project. We can even have an amazing nap on a rainy day, right? Whereas some people find joy in doing more, and having more around them. Introverts tend to find joy in less, actually. When we do that thing where we do turn inward, though, we're not withdrawing or holding back like some people may think. And I can understand how it could look that way to a non-introvert. But what we're doing is we're actually just choosing to show up in the place that's basically sacred to us, as Holly Gerth says, right? Where we're showing up in a place where our creativity comes from when we turn inward. We're showing up in the place where our imagination happens when we turn inward. We're going to the place where insights and breakthroughs and solutions happen for us, the place where honestly we connect best with God. Extroverts obviously do those things very differently than we do, but understand, neither the extrovert way nor the introvert way is right or wrong, right? They're just different because of how we process life, because of our neurotransmitters and how those are different. Introverts and extroverts also differ in terms of what's called our sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous systems. What's that about? Well, extroverts are wired to spend their energy, basically, whereas introverts are wired to conserve our energy. The extroverts use their sympathetic nervous system, which gets them ready for action and is associated with our fight or flight response as humans. But introverts, we use our parasympathetic nervous system, which is what relaxes and restores us as humans. That's why introverts feel so drained when we're in situations where there's a lot going on around us, because it's forcing us to rely on our sympathetic nervous system, and it burns too much fuel for us, basically, and it leaves us on empty. For me, literally just being in a supermarket with super bright lights, even if no one's around, there's not even music playing, just being in a big room with super bright lights can be too much and can make me feel super anxious when I'm just trying to shop for groceries, just because of how I'm wired as an introvert. Sunglasses are an introvert's very good friend, okay? As are earplugs at times, if we're honest, okay? And there's no shame in those. No shame in those. Introverts and extroverts also differ in terms of our brain pathways and how we process things. An introvert's brain pathway, the main brain pathway for us, is actually longer, more complex, and internally focused than an extrovert's. Now, that doesn't mean extroverts are dumber than introverts or anything like that. That's not the point. An extrovert's is just shorter, more straightforward, and externally focused. Okay, neither one is right or wrong. They're just different with different strengths. Okay, extroverts rely on their short-term memory more, and they tend to be really good at being in the here and now. Introverts, though, we tend to rely on our long-term memory, and when we're trying to decide on something or process something, we tend to think in terms of the past, the present, and the future, all in that one, topic. And as a result, introverts, we often need longer than extroverts to respond to questions that people ask us. But it's not because introverts are slow thinkers or we're ignoring you, despite what it might look like. It's because we're deep thinkers, and we take longer to arrive at a conclusion because of all the information we're considering when you ask us a simple question. Speaking of which, understand, being an introvert is not the same as being shy, okay? It's not the same as being antisocial. It's not the same as being apathetic. It's not the same as being aloof. Obviously, I am a major introvert. When I do introvert versus extrovert assessments, I come out like 9 out of 10 introvert. But as you can tell, I have no problem talking your ear off. But notice how I do it. First of all, I do it only as long as my energy lasts, and then I do need to go recharge. And I also do it in that I'm not working out what I'm saying while I'm saying it. This podcast that I do, I talk 20 to 30, maybe 40 minutes. I prepped for hours ahead of time as far as what I'm going to say. This isn't on the spot. Every so often, the Holy Spirit will give me something really cool to add that I didn't plan on, which I think is fun and cool. But 90%, if not more, of what I say in podcasts and in sermons that you hear, that's all stuff I worked out ahead of time over days, over hours, sometimes over weeks or even months before I present it, okay? Being an introvert doesn't mean you never talk to anybody. It's just about how you process life, right? It's all and only about how your nervous system responds to what's going on around you. So, whereas extroverts get what they need from being around people and activity and external things going on, for introverts, we actually need solitude to recalibrate our brains and our nervous systems, which is why you will often find introverts, when their energy's done, retreating to somewhere they can be alone. We're not being antisocial. We don't dislike you. That's just how we recharge, right? Kind of like your phone. Eventually, when your phone runs out of battery, what do? Keep pushing it? No. You have to just let it sit and recharge for a while. Then it's good to go for more activity. Think of introverts like your phone. It's kind of like that. And that's why, while I can definitely talk your ear off for a while my energy lasts, once my energy's gone, I need solitude time. Amy can tell you, you'll see me teach at church, but when church is over, it's time for me to go take a break and be by myself, maybe read the Bible. We'll get to the specifics in a minute or so, but maybe take a nap. Once the energy's gone, it's gone, and I have to replenish it, right? Because that solitude time is where us introverts refuel. It's how we plug in, like your phone, right? It's where we refuel ourselves for socializing. It's where we process our thoughts of what has happened and even what's going to happen. Again, like how I prep for sermons, I need to do that in solitude. It's where we make decisions. It's where we figure out priorities. It's where we basically reconnect with ourselves. In fact, anytime you see me talking on a podcast or a sermon, don't forget, he probably prepped a lot ahead of time by himself, and when it's over, he'll need some time by himself again to recharge from all the energy he just used by talking, okay? And when I say introverts need that solitude time, that is not an exaggeration. It is literally a need as much as air, food, or water, okay? Solitude time is a need. If we don't have enough of it, we will suffer for it as introverts. In fact, Holly Gerth calls it having an introvert hangover. And she confirms that, yes, too much time around people and activity and not enough time alone to recharge can leave an introvert feeling exhausted and even physically sore or sick, as in like sore muscles. And I've experienced this. In fact, she has 7 symptoms of an introvert hangover. Listen to these. Symptom number 1 for when introverts know we're done. Number 1, you're done with all people everywhere forever and ever. Amen. She says, yes, even the ones you adore. This makes you feel like a horrible person. Why would you run away from your family and closest friends? But it's because you have an introvert hangover. Remember this, it's not about people. It's about your nervous system being overloaded by external stimulation. And people, including the most wonderful ones, are very stimulating. Symptom number 2 for introverts, how we know when we're out of energy. Number 2 is when someone tries to talk to you, it's hard to focus or form a complete sentence. Ask my wife. This happens all the time. When I am done for the day, I literally can't put words together. When asked your name, you reply, that's a hard question. She's being kind of silly. But that is what it's like. Your spouse asks what you want for dinner and you say, food, me like. This causes confusion and concern. Naps fix this condition, by the way. Legit true. Number 3, symptom of an introvert hangover. If you struggle with anxiety or depression, those struggles get worse. Absolutely, can totally verify that. The negative critical voice in your mind gets much louder. This is counterproductive because instead of getting the rest you need, you try harder to prove you're a good, social, productive person. She says, ignore your inner critic, introverts, and take care of yourself. You're not selfish, you're spent. Okay. Symptom number 4, you have a headache, stomachache, back pain, and other physical symptoms with no explanation. There's a difference between a plain headache and an introvert hangover one. The latter comes with stiff, sore shoulders and travels up your neck to the back of your head. It's a tension headache because that much interacting makes you tense as an introvert. Number 5, you're zoning out, daydreaming, or staring into space. Sorry, if you're listening on the Apple podcast, you didn't see what I did there, but yeah, kind of like that. This is your mind's way of taking a break if your body can't or won't. So if possible, you need to let yourself do this, she says, if you're an introvert. It's not you being spacey or lazy. It's a smart survival tactic by your introvert system. If you have a kid who does this and they are an introvert, they might be overwhelmed by circumstances rather than just unable to focus. Number 6, you're afraid you might yell at someone or kick them in the shin because everyone and everything gets on your last nerve. The stranger talking on her cell phone in public, social media posts, the people you love most in all the universe. Again, this isn't proof you're a selfish, no good person. It's proof you're an unselfish person who's given everything you've got and then some. And now it's time to give yourself what you need too, which is solitude. And number 7, symptom of an introvert hangover, God feels far away, as if he's mad at you. I can verify all of these for you personally. With an introvert hangover, you will not feel spiritual, and things like saying a quick prayer or reading a Bible verse won't snap you out of it. You're not in trouble with God when you're depleted as an introvert. He's there to help restore every part of you. I hope that's helpful to some of the introverts listening to this. If you were like, I thought I was the only one, you're not. by far. Your pastor can verify he has experienced those as well. Despite what we may wish were true, despite what our culture may pressure us into wishing were true, we introverts do not have unlimited energy. And when we run out of energy, that hangover will happen. So we have to constantly watch our introvert energy and monitor it, because no one's going to do it for us, in case you haven't learned that by now. You think of it like a bank account. You only have so much to spend. If you try to spend more than you have, you get overdrawn and bad things happen, right? It's the same with introvert energy. We got to manage our bank account. We have to choose solitude time when we need it, right? Make sure we do enough depositing and recharging, and however you want to think of that. And don't understand, though, solitude and isolation are two different things, and we need to know the difference as introverts, okay? Solitude time to recharge is healthy for an introvert. Isolation is unhealthy for anyone, okay? Solitude is something we choose to do for a limited time in order to recharge and take care of ourselves so we can get back out into life, get back out into relationships. Isolation is when we feel disengaged from relationships and life and ourselves and God, okay? Even as introverts, we need satisfying relationships. We may not need 50,000 of them like an extrovert does. That's their strength. They can relate to lots of people, but we do need at least a couple. We do need at least one person we can reach out to when we need them. We need at least somewhere we feel like we're part of a family, whether it's our literal biological family or a church family. Even if it's just a small group, even introverts need relationships. We need community. It is a need. God was not kidding in Genesis when he said it was not good for the first man to be alone, right? It's not good for anyone to be alone, even introverts, as far as relationship goes, right? We still need that sense that we're connected to others and God. We still need people that care about us and that we care about. So don't misunderstand. Isolation, where you're cut off from everyone, is unhealthy. Solitude, where you choose for a limited time to just basically recharge by yourself, that is healthy for an introvert, okay? And Holly Gerth says, here's how to tell if you have healthy solitude or isolation. Think about these three things. Are you choosing the time alone or not? If you're choosing it, that's healthy. If you're not choosing to be alone, that's unhealthy. Do you find that your time alone actually recharges your energy or not? If it actually recharges you, that's healthy solitude. If not, that's bad isolation. And third, do you still feel connected to someone or something when you're in solitude time? Like, I still feel connected to God. I still feel connected to my family. I'm just taking a break to recharge. Or when you're alone, do you feel disconnected? Even if you're in a crowd of people, do you feel disconnected from people? Isolation is unhealthy. If that's where you find yourself, send me an email. Let's talk. Let's fix that. Let's get you back to the place where it's healthy solitude, not isolation, okay? So what specifically does healthy solitude time look like for an introvert? Well, it depends on what fills you up as the introvert, right? For me, time with God is my biggest one. Being somewhere where it's quiet, where I can just read some scripture, maybe read a commentary, read a Christian, living type book by Craig Groeschel, Francis Chan, Max Lucado. I love reading apologetics books. That kind of stuff fills me up, recharges me. Praying sometimes does, but it's also more energy going out because I'm talking. So sometimes just quietly reading, quietly praying, saying little prayers to God. Another thing for me is art. Some of you know I love to paint. I do cartoons. That's a day off solitude time recharging activity for me, as long as I keep the right perspective about it. Going for a walk by myself in a place where I feel safe, especially places that are naturey, like Point Lobos or the Redwoods in Santa Cruz. Just going for a walk by myself is a very good recharging solitude time. Exercising by myself is a great way to recharge. Taking a nap, again, in a quiet place, a great way to recharge. I will say, though, I often find it more difficult for me to relax if the place where I am has a lot of clutter or is messy. And according to Holly Gerth, that's not just a me thing. That's not just me being a neat freak. A home or work environment that is cluttered or feels cluttered can itself be draining for an introvert. So if you're an introvert and you've felt that too, you're not alone there either. Research has also shown that certain foods can be draining for introverts. Did you know that? Caffeine, sugar, white flour, alcohol, even fast food. Oh, I don't want to read that because I like fast food. And that's not to say you can't have those things in a proper, amount, but it is to say, be aware that those can be draining to you as an introvert too. And if you're already constantly worn out, maybe don't make it worse for yourself by having a bunch of energy drinks, okay? Or having some alcohol. Pick something better, something healthier. Get some mineral water, okay? Seriously. Take that self-care and solitude approach that you need to be healthy. Now you might say, well, how much solitude time do you really need? It varies. Sometimes I just need 15 minutes and I'm good to get back out there. Sometimes I need a whole day. I take Mondays off as a pastor because Sunday is an incredibly draining day for me. Not because I don't enjoy ministry, just because I'm pouring out so much of myself into ministry because I enjoy it, because I love teaching and being there for people. That's a lot of introvert energy going out. And by the end of Sunday, often I barely can put a sentence together because I'm so done. And I just need to just do absolutely nothing. And so I take Mondays off. That's my usual day off. So if you ever tried to reach me on a Monday and you haven't been able to, that's why. Call me Tuesday. If you have an emergency, I'm still there for you. But see, that's part of the point, though. I want to be there for you, not be this shell of someone who can't even give you a hug because I'm so drained. So introverts need their days off. That's how I do it. How much solitude time do you need? Holly Gerth says, one way you can tell when you've had enough, oddly enough, is when you find yourself wanting to be around people again. And I can tell you, on my days off, on Mondays, often there's a point where after I've been by myself for most of the day, I'll reach a point, maybe 4 o'clock-ish, where, I'm ready for Amy to come home from work now. I'm ready to interact and hang out again. And I know, hey, I'm charged up. Your phone tells you when it's fully charged, and there are ways to know when you're fully charged. It just could take some trial and error for you. So give it a try. Give it a try. Okay, Matt, you might say, so how do I know for sure if I am an introvert, right? That's a lot of great info, but am I an introvert? Am I not an introvert? Well, we can find out. You can do a assessment called the Myers-Briggs Temperament Inventory. If you want the full on, here's, pretty much for sure whether you're an introvert or not, you can look that up online. I also happen to have a kind of watered down short version of it if you want to try this with me right now. It's just 9 questions. So what I'll do is I will read a statement and then 2 possible ways to respond to it. I'm not going to tell you which is introvert and which is extrovert. Don't try to guess either. Your job is just to write down, grab a piece of paper, grab a note on your phone and just write down A or B. Okay, for each question, A or B, A or B. Which one is your natural response? Don't overthink it. Don't ask someone for advice. Just what's your knee-jerk first response, okay? Here we go. Number 1, you have been invited to a party, and you know only the host and the hostess. You're obligated to go. While you're at the party, which one will you tend to do? A, find it stimulating to meet new or interesting people and enjoy talking to this group or that group? Or B, will you find someone who is interested in something you're interested in and spend most of the evening probably just talking with one person at a time? Okay, you're at a party. Do you go around to different groups, A? Or do you pick maybe just one person or at least one person at a time and talk about something deep with them? Those are your only 2 options. Don't overthink it. Number 2, your hostess at the party has planned several games for everyone to play. You've never heard of the first game, though. So what are you going to do? A, are you going to play the game to understand it? Or B, are you going to let others play first so you can watch to understand it? New game you've never heard of, do you play it to understand it? Or do you step back and watch others play to understand it? A or B? Number 3, on the way home from the party, you realize, that was a pleasant evening. Will you tend to A, find that you have renewed energy and you're all keyed up because of the stimulating evening and let's go do some more stuff? Or B, will you find that, I did enjoy that, but I'm done, I'm drained, time for bed? A, that was awesome, let's do more. Or B, that was awesome, but I'm good, it's time to slow down. Number 4, you've had a tiring day. When you come home, will you want to A, call a friend or 2 to meet up for dinner? Or B, will you turn off your phone so you can have a quiet evening alone? A or B? Number 5, if something enters your mind, do you tend to A, say it almost instantly, or B, think about it before you talk about it? A or B? Number 6, if there's a long pause in a conversation, haha, like that, A, what happened just now? Did you feel as if, oh my gosh, something needs to fill that silence? Someone should say something. Or B, did you hardly notice the pause or even find it refreshing? When there's a pause in a conversation, do you feel like something has to fill it, A? Or do you feel like, oh, I didn't even notice. It was nice to have a moment of quiet. That's B. Number 7, do you enjoy working A, with lots of people around you? Or B, do you enjoy working alone, so there's little interruption? A or B. Number 8, when you were a child, did you A, need to have lots of friends around? Or B, tend to be quite happy playing by yourself? And number 9, do you tend to A, jump right in when you're faced with a new challenge, or B, stand back and check out a new situation before you commit? Well, based on all the describing I did before the quiz, you probably may have figured out if you had more B's than A's, then that points to the fact that you're probably an introvert, or at least there's a good chance you're an introvert. If they came out really close to each other, you could be what's called an ambivert, or there could be other possibilities too. Some studies and psychologists have even discovered that if you're under enough stress, you'll actually switch temporarily to deal with the stress. I've experienced that too. I am an introvert. That doesn't change. But when I went through a very traumatic situation a few years ago with a health issue, I needed to talk through that instead of just be alone. I kind of switched to extrovert mode because it was so stressfully overwhelming. And so if you're going through a traumatic time of some kind, sometimes you can temporarily switch temperaments, so to speak, or at least it'll look like that till you work through that traumatic time. So there's other possibilities. But if you basically resonated mostly, if not all the way, with the B's in those 9 questions, more than the A's, the B's mean you're likely an introvert. Okay? So, back to our original question. That was all intro. We're going to be here for 3 more hours. No, I'm kidding. Back to our original question. Is it okay to be an introvert? Because it certainly can feel like it's not okay in America in general, can't it? It can definitely feel like it's not okay in the American church even, right? Because you see the extroverts in a church service, sitting in the front row. And when they sing worship songs, they sing their guts out. They have their hands raised. Their eyes are closed. They're crying. So much emotion being expressed. When it's the fellowship time or the shake hands time, the extroverts, come here, give me a hug. How are you doing? It's so great to see you. Hey, high five. And they walk around and after church is over, hey, we should go out to eat. We should go do something this afternoon. Let's go. And if you're like me, you look at that and you go, why am I not like that? What's wrong with me? Shouldn't I be crying with my hands up and singing loud during the worship songs? Shouldn't I be excited to see people? Shouldn't I want to hang out with them more after church is over? What's wrong with me? Can I confess something even as a pastor? While I love leading worship songs and I love using my musical talents for God, when I'm in the audience of a church and someone else is leading the music, I don't actually get that much out of the worship songs. And especially as a pastor, if I've taught at a service, I don't really feel like going to lunch and hanging out with people all afternoon because I'm tired and drained. Even during the fellowship time, while I do genuinely care about these people in this church, and I do hope they're having a great day, and I love them, and I want to care for them, I don't always feel like hugging everybody and talking to everybody and high-fiving and being that extroverted. Is there something wrong with me? Is that okay? Am I a horrible pastor? Am I not spiritual enough? Is it okay to just be an introvert? Or is our personality, like, by definition, a sin or something? Is our personality a result of the fall of mankind? What if we aren't super extroverted? Are we sinning? If you're like me and you're an introvert, you've wondered about that. So let's look at some scriptures together. 2 thoughts for you on this. Thought number 1, Jesus. What do I mean? Literally, in my office, on the wall, so I see it often, is this verse, Luke 5:16. I love this verse. As Jesus went about doing his ministry of teaching and healing people and loving people, you know what Luke 5:16 says? It says, quote, Jesus often, keyword, often. That word is huge in the little verse on my wall. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. We miss verses like that, don't we? Because we jump from the parables to the parables, or the healing stories to the healing stories, and we miss the Luke 5:16s. This one little verse in between the stories that says, but Jesus often, not rarely, often withdrew away from people, withdrew away from the crowds, withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Why is that encouraging? Because obviously that's not a sin, because Jesus was sinless. And if the Son of God, who was perfect and had the most important mission in history, took those times, why would we think we don't need them? In fact, Mark 6:31 says that at one point in Jesus' ministry, at least at one point, quote, because so many people were coming and going that Jesus and his disciples didn't even have a chance to eat, Jesus said to them, quote, listen, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Mark 6:31. So clearly, healthy solitude time is not a sin. It's actually encouraged and modeled by the perfect Son of God himself. Is it okay to be an introvert? Well, thought number one, Jesus. And thought number two, which we kind of talked about on our last podcast, is what Psalm 139 verses 13 and 14 say. Listen to this again. King David, he's talking to God, and he says, you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Which I think would be safe to assume that that includes being an introvert. Not that David necessarily was, but I think introverts are fearfully and wonderfully made by God too, even down to our central nervous systems. After all, think of the benefits of being an introvert for a minute. I know we don't hear about this nearly enough, if at all, in our culture, because our culture seems to scream at us that, well, if you want to make it, you better be an extrovert. Extroverts, that's where it is, You're not a good spiritual Christian if you're not an extrovert. Have you ever thought about the benefits of being an introvert, though? Let me read you some of these. Again, back to Holly Gerth. Understand, first of all, because introverts are so stimulated by what's going on around us, and that's why we get drained so easily. But think about this. Because we're so stimulated by our environment, it also means we're super aware of our environment. It means we're naturally super observant. And think of how huge that is. One of the compliments I would get over and over and over when I was a security officer at the Monterey Bay Aquarium was, man, you are so observant. You notice the smallest little things that need to be fixed, the smallest little details that need to be addressed to keep this place safe and secure. Matt, how do you notice these things? How do you notice these little things? Simple. I'm an introvert. We notice details. People compliment the art I do. Your artwork is so detailed. It looks so real. How do you do that? Well, I pray, but also God made me an introvert, so I notice details. I'm into details. As a pastor and just on a personal level, people will tell me, you're so compassionate, Matt. How are you so compassionate and loving? Well, I give God credit. He changes my heart, but also I'm an introvert. And introverts notice details like your body language, like when you sit in a different seat than you usually do on Sunday, a little further away. Like when you miss a Sunday, like when you seem sad, like when there's something off, we notice and we care if Jesus has changed our heart that direction. One benefit of being an introvert, we notice details. And that's huge. Introverts are also great listeners, right? Again, because we use the longer pathway in our brain, that means we reflect on things and choose our words and our actions very carefully. Yes, extroverts are very good at making quick decisions, but a lot of times what you need in a relationship isn't an instant solution, is it? You need insight and support. And introverts do the insight and the support really well. I think of the book of James where it says to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Obeying that verse is our jam as introverts. We can do that. Introverts also tend to have a very strong sense of empathy. We also tend to be extremely loyal. As Holly Gerth says, we are built for relationship distance, not speed, but distance. We also have the capacity as introverts to be highly influential too, which may be something that surprises you. But as she says, realize true influence is not just about being loud and getting attention. True influence is about making a connection. You know, John Maxwell, the leadership expert, has said, you know, someone may have the title of leader in a room, but if you watch the people in the room, you'll see who the real leader actually is. Because a title doesn't mean anyone's following you. You could be the CEO by title, but everyone in the room could be looking to the accountant because they have more respect for them. Leadership's not about being loud or titles. Influence is about connection. And some of the most influential people in history have been introverts. Did you know that? Let me read you a list of some here. Like Katherine Booth. Who's that? Well, she founded the Salvation Army. Introvert. C.S. Lewis, the theologian who also wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. Introvert. His dear friend J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit. Also an introvert. Liz Miller, the senior marketing manager of Divine Chocolate that we bought at SEC before. Introvert. Abraham Lincoln. Introvert. Max Lucado. Introvert. Albert Einstein. Introvert. Michael Jordan. Introvert. Brie Larson. Captain Marvel, right? Introvert. Bill Gates. Introvert. Mother Teresa. Introvert. Beethoven. Introvert. And even from what we can tell in Scripture, Moses. Introvert. Don't think for a second introverts can't have a positive influence on the world. Yes, the way introverts work, the way our brains are wired, that does also lead to struggles sometimes, though. And I think it's there that we do see how the fall of mankind and how sin has impacted us. For example, because of the way our brains work, creative introverts like me especially, we're very prone to anxiety and depression, as I can also verify. But non-creative introverts can be prone to those too. Because for some reason, as we focus on details and notice them, we tend to focus on negative details, which again, helpful when you have a job like in safety and security, but not so helpful if you don't. And that's all you think about is what's wrong with things. So we need to watch that as introverts and learn to rewire our thinking, which is possible when it comes to things like that. We also often let our inner critic motivate us. Every introvert seems to have this inner critic. My wife, as an extrovert, didn't get that for a really long time until I learned all this. And she's like, oh, that's what it is. Yeah, introverts, we rely on this inner critic to motivate us. And that can lead to a lot of problems. And, we're really talented as introverts at getting stuck in mental circles, too. If you're an introvert, you probably know exactly what I mean. I don't even have to explain that, right? But see, those times are when we need to reach out for help in those good relationships that we have. Because we've had solitude time, not isolation, right? When we need help, that's when we reach out. We don't listen to our inner critic. We listen to the Holy Spirit instead. Which really leads me to my last point I want to make for myself as well. Preaching to myself here too. And here's the last point, okay? Is it okay to be an introvert? I think so. How do I know? Jesus. Psalm 139. But here's the thing, okay? While yes, it is okay to be an introvert, and yes, we do need to proactively take the self-care solitude time to stay healthy, none of that is ever a legitimate reason to sin. None of that is ever an excuse or a free pass to disobey God. What do I mean? Well, introvert or extrovert, realize there are certain things God commands us to do as His followers, as His children. And we don't get a free pass on those just because we're introverts. I can't play the introvert card with those. Well, I'm an introvert, so I don't have to do that. God's commands are His commands. And if we love Him, we'll obey Him, Jesus says, right? So in Hebrews 10, verse 25, when it commands us not to miss church gatherings, we don't get a free pass on that. And realize anything God commands us is for our good. We need community. We need to be in a church gathering for so many reasons we've talked about before. Don't let the devil talk you out of that one or trick you into playing the introvert card. Well, I don't need that. I can do church by myself. No, you can't. So many of Jesus' commands are what? About one another. Love one another. Forgive one another. Encourage one another. I can't do that if I'm not around one another. I cannot be a Christian in isolation. It is not possible to follow Jesus unless I'm around one another. The devil also wants to keep you out of church. So many reasons we've talked about over the years of SEC. Long story short, when God commands us not to miss gathering as a church, that's a command that introverts need to obey to, right? We are commanded to attend church gatherings. And I know you might say, well, of course, Matt, but as an introvert who's been in ministry for 20-something years, and just as an introvert myself, I know the temptation, and I know we are really talented at coming up with excuses to miss gatherings where there's people. And you other introverts out there aren't fooling your introvert pastor when you do that either, just so you know. I get that we need solitude time. I need it too. But we need to choose when that is wisely and not choose it when it's church time. Choose the solitude time when it's Netflix time. Turn off the TV. Take your solitude time then. Choose solitude time when it's scrolling through Instagram time. Put your phone down. Take solitude time then. Don't miss the church time. That's not the time to take the solitude time, right? Schedule it otherwise. We need to gather for church. God commands it. He also commands us to share our faith, to tell people about Jesus, right? And if you go to SCC and you're watching this when it's released, we actually have an entire series on how to share your faith coming up, God willing, next in our church gatherings with lots of ideas. You know, you might be like, well, I'm not good at talking to people. Well, that is going to be part of it, but there's other ways too. Look at this. I'm recording a podcast in a room by myself, just me and God. I'm an introvert. This is a way to share the gospel as an introvert. I draw a weekly comic strip. That's a way to share the gospel as an introvert, right? You don't have to fill a stadium and get up on a podium to talk. You might say, yeah, well, that's good, Matt, because I'm not good at talking to people at all. Okay, but realize something else about that. The Bible says, Jesus says, the Holy Spirit will give you what to say when you need it anyway, right? The Apostle Paul, my goodness, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, listen to what he says about how he preached the gospel at Corinth. He says, when I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. I didn't use fancy words, right? For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling. I don't know if Paul was an introvert. I'm going to guess he wasn't, but I can identify with this passage, okay? This is what it feels like to try to talk to people. But listen, he says, my message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power. Why? Listen, so your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power. I don't talk good to people. Good. Because you don't want their faith in Christ to depend on your fancy, clever words anyway. You want it to depend on the Holy Spirit. You want it to depend on God. Paul also makes a point in 2 Corinthians 12 that he had some kind of physical ailment, this thorn in his flesh. He asked God to take it away, and God said no. Why? Because God's power is made perfect in weakness. So Paul says, I'll boast about my weaknesses, because then people see how great my God is, and that's what my life's about anyway. Our job is just to show up. Show up when God tells us to. Show up to church. Show up to tell people about Jesus. Just get there. Just show up. That's our job. Stop letting the devil talk you out of it. Stop listening to your inner critic and start listening to the Holy Spirit. I mean, as we said, one thing we introverts are really good at naturally is what? Loyalty. So let that loyalty out. That loyalty to your church family. That loyalty to the God who commands these things. That loyalty in your relationship with him. Use that to show up and watch what he does as a result. And if, as you do, you have a question you'd like us to tackle, send it to me. Email it to office@seasidechurchonline.org. Again, that's office@seasidechurchonline.org. And God willing, we'll plan to see you again next time.